Right. I am in the southwest of England. This is kind of irrelevant. Could be anywhere. This is about the environment, however, something that is never spoken about. For 50 years, I have been connected with what is environmentalism. 100 yards up there begins National Trust property. Essentially, 50% of the population have to make a choice, because that's what environmentalism really is about. I shall try and briefly explain. Now, I've actually still got a bit of COVID in me. I've got a temperature. I'm at a southwestern small town on the southern coast. The only reason I mention that is that this morning, in the harbour down there, it's 10 degrees today. There's a storm coming. Myself, I was bathing in the river at 6:30 this morning. This morning will have been half a dozen women swimming in the harbour. They do it every morning. Now, 50 years ago, my parents, I say my parents, bought 20 acres and then later on a couple of surrounding small farms. They bought 20 acres in North Wales, a rundown, dilapidated, once, an old farm with 2 or 3 small properties connected that needed 5 years renovation, 50 years ago. That renovation basically was carried out, the fences rebuilt, the old buildings restored. Oh yeah, we should, got to remember that. Old buildings restored, and then a large vegetable patch. It took us about 2 years. Myself and old Ralph, we renovated and brought back to life a huge vegetable patch, 3 times the size of this, and 5 times the size of this garden. On that central 20 acres, there were actually there were 3 women living and 3 men and me. I was aged 10. Now, in the last 48 hours, I've heard 2 middle-aged women speaking about the environment. Caroline Lucas on Radio 480 Questions on Friday, talking about the environment and housing. Now, I've been happily homeless for 2 years in a region where there are so many properties around with only 1 person living, just like my last region. 2 middle-aged women talking about the environment. Let me tell you about the environment. Let me tell you what the environment is. So, or rather, the aspect of the environment that everybody says they're concerned about, which comes down to 1 word, pollution, which is in actual fact about 4 things. Firstly, obviously litter. Now, the southwest is just covered in litter everywhere. It's tragic. And a council vehicle with 2 men came by here about an hour ago to empty the bins there. They didn't bother with that litter there. The coastal path, or rather, well, the coves are full of plastic. It's tragic. Absolutely tragic. But we'll back out of that one. That's litter. Okay? obviously we have farming, and then we have the things like transport. Now, I am so I've always been environmentally thoughtful. 25 years ago, I've had two professions, 2.5 really, 5 years as a bookseller, but 25 years ago, let's be crystal clear about this thing called the environment. For 20 years up to then, I'd had a job that everybody in the world would die for. You can actually see what I used to do for a living. If you go onto YouTube, a show-off young man, he's quite interesting in a way, Citation, C-I-T-A-T-I-O-N Max, Citation Max, a man who flies around a private small jet. Well, I flew around turboprops, it was pretty much the same. The most perfect job in the world, everybody would say. I gave that up. My daughter was born. In fact, she was made on this. This, right. That's 30 years old. Right. I stopped doing that because I knew that the future of her planet was not compatible with using private aircraft or much in the way of commercial aircraft. This is nothing new to me. But at the same time, 25 years ago, I lived, you can actually look it up on Google Maps, I lived within Brecon Beacons National Park, across the road from Radnor End Campsite near Hay-on-Wye. In fact, the place we lived for a few years is there on the map as well, called Longlands. Now, the woman who owned that campsite, the only then campsite for Hay-on-Wye, quite large, on Sunday evening, within Brecon Beacons National Park, that was the draw for the people to come and stay there. On Sunday evening would be left along the side of the road a dozen bin bags of the rubbish for the weekend. And by Monday morning, when it probably was Monday morning, was the rubbish collection, foxes, badgers would have torn to shreds those bin bags, and along the side of the road would be the most terrible, disgusting litter. Now, I couldn't say anything because living a kilometre from their property, if they would have beaten me up had we said anything. But it was tragic. At that point, I'd already decided earlier that it's like, leave this disgraceful land where everything is spin. Bullshit. Laziness. But going back to the choice that 50% of the population needs to make. Now, I must remember to play this, it's quite funny. I'll do it in a moment. Let's try and get my waffle out first. Me and Ralph, 50 years ago, we would be day in, day out, all winter, salvaging old wood, salvaging old corrugated iron, rebuilding fences, sometimes using new materials. Now, Caroline Lucas is going on any questions, or is there any questions yet on Radio 4 about the need to recycle steel, etc. Let's be clear, what is the environment? Well, forgetting the coastal areas, inland, it's... Now tonight, there's a huge storm coming. If fences aren't built properly, if sheds aren't restored, kept in good order, they will blow away by the wind. So what a person has to do in the environment is constantly be out fixing and then salvaging the rotten wood, fixing the rotten wood, the hulls of boats, everything, to keep it usable for as long as possible, so that more of the wonderful planet's wonderful natural resources aren't used unnecessarily. You're looking after your old stuff. That's actually what the environment is. And that can be farming as well. 3 years ago I created a small community around some horses, and I went to salvage the posts that had been taken out because a fence had been taken down to be replanted with a hedge. So nobody would help me. My woman friend who owned the land or rented it, she said, well, you can use those posts. She didn't come and help me. And that's the choice. The choice is, so 50 years ago, now it was 1975, The Good Life came out on television with Felicity Kendall. We all loved it. There's Felicity Kendall out there doing the work with her husband Tom. From 50 years ago, none of those women would ever help. 25 years ago, okay, I took up with somebody, that person would never help. And for 25 years, now, here's the sting in the tail. I've known half a dozen women, and actually I knew one about 2 years ago I met her. A 25-year-old woman who lived up in the hills, mid Wales, in the toughest circumstances ever. She was the shepherd. She was as tough as me. We had a great laugh. We were just friends who would meet up. She'd be tending her flock on her quad. Women can do these things exactly the same as men. I've known 3 or 4 very well. But here's the choice. Now you have to look at the countryside and farming and using the land and using the resources on the land in terms of a person's lifetime. 60 years, let's say. I hope I live another 10 years, in which case it would be 60 years I've been around the land. 2 professions. One was as a legal advocate. Absolutely fucking lethal. So don't think I'm some kind of jabberwocky. I gave that up 10 years ago because you could no longer tell the truth. You could no longer tell the people who were coming to you for help in Britain. I could no longer tell who was telling the truth anymore. That's the sorry state of this land. But let's keep to the point. For your Caroline Lucas, your Annie Leonard, whose memoirs were featured on Something Understood this morning. No one's got any problem with, okay, men will do a fair amount of the work. I saw a bloke down there at 8 o'clock this morning looking after his raw materials because there's a storm coming. But basically, over a sustained period of time, that's the key phrase. It's always the men who are left doing this stuff. We have no company. We have no sustained, straightforward, enjoyable assistance. And nobody will speak about this. Now, where does that end up? Right, 2 miles up there is a car park where every morning loads of dog people gather. Rescued dogs, new dogs. Now I can tell you for a fact, one of the biggest fucking cons of the whole thing is that a lot of these dogs are puppy farmed. Puppy farms require netting, fences built, play areas for the dogs. Now it all comes down to this, and it will seem so inane, but for 50 years and longer, I mean 50 years ago, none of this is new. Me and old Ralph, there's me age 10, on the news was 50 years ago, acid rain. Yes, acid rain was destroying the forests and the land of Western Europe, Scandinavia in particular. But that's simply, I mean, that's like blaming, it's the gods or whatever. No, that is factory production of raw materials, not of raw materials, of materials we need, of turning raw materials into into products that we need, fencing, steel fencing, wood posts, etc, 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 gates, tin roofs, and then building materials for all the unnecessary housing that Caroline Lucas wants to build, because there are as many empty rooms today in Britain as there were 15 years ago. There are enough empty rooms in Britain to house everybody quite adequately. It's only about selfishness and I'm special, I need my little space, but she will talk about that. But let's just keep to this one simple thing. Why the men who came by this morning, why are they miserable and sour? Because they don't. The environment needs to be about one thing: love. Not hippy-dippy, I love Mother Earth. No. Loving another human being over a sustained period of time and respecting them and valuing them such that you are keeping the surrounds for that person in good nick. Back to our dogs. I can tell you for a fact that, yes, much of the pens that are required for these dogs they all show off came by a short while ago. And this is what it comes down to. If the man who is left to build those dog pens, if he has a nice life, which means he has love, functional day in, day out, for years, fellowship with another human being, and actually in the countryside 99.9% of people are heterosexual, so that means a female human being. He will care more about the work he's doing. He will, when he's taking down the old pen that's become a bit rotten, he will salvage the fencing, the wire, such that it can be reused in the future. If his life is bleak and there's nobody left and women don't ever help us, or coquette, dilettante, just doing their nails and being sour, which I'm afraid to say is the reality, he will not have any love in his heart to make sure that netting is kept, reused, or passed on to somebody else who might be able to use the old netting. Now that's happening, yeah, I've seen it. That's the point. This is not some kind of mad fucking rant. I've seen it. It's been the last 25 years of my life. Everywhere I've lived, stuff just gets chucked, wasted, bulldozed endlessly. Because
he's a wonderful cook and treats me to delicious food.
Because
David means the world to me, and I simply want to tell him how happy he makes me. That is
we have this fantasy.
Lucy Atkinson says, I'm emailing you from the island of Lefkada in Greece, where I live with my husband Simon and two sons Joshua and Lucas. I'd like a shout out for Simon, who's currently building us a beautiful new house single-handedly.
He's building a new house
single-handedly.
Now, yeah, fantasy. Few years, all goes well. But it needs to be about 60 years. That over 60 years, this man, I've been doing it off and on for the last 25 years. Rebuilding bits, I like doing it. But you never have any, you never even get a woman bringing you a thermos of soup anymore. Now this sounds sour and absurd. But believe me, men working in the countryside, because somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to be rebuilding, tending to the material, to the fences, the roofs, etc., 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 that we need, that society needs, such that the countryside can be used for the 70%, which is agricultural, in a kind of sustainable way. Time and time again, I have come across men who it's been so long since they've had a healthy, happy-ish, most of the time, relationship, because women have become so damn, oh, you're not like that, you can't be like that, you are, rather than, hey, you're going through a bad period, you're drinking a bit too much or whatever, let's find a way through. No, it's all become a revolting prescriptive, judgmental melodrama, which is actually based on one thing, fundamentally. The women don't want to be there. Well, I can guarantee you that only a happy man will look after that bit of fence there when it breaks down. And it actually makes me laugh how, for a decade, I returned to doing more of these jobs. You don't even get an enjoyable synergy anymore with the woman landowner, with the whatever. It's all just actually bitchiness. Now, that's the choice. If we are, as a society, obviously government needs to deal with certain aspects of environmental legislation, but that's all kind of cheating because they pretend, they press release that they are, and then you need environmentally aware people working together to hold them to account over long periods of time. But everything in this thing called the environment, well, it's actually just become 75% of the voices more are women bitching about the environment, rather than actually in a proper, sustained, permanent enough way, 5 years, 10 years, being allied in a good way with fellowship, so that as small groups or just couples, we hold power to account, farming, government, etc. You've got to be doing that, but you've also got to be doing the work in the environment too. I mean, we can see how much National fucking Trust care. You've got to be doing the work such that it's all ticking over as sustainably as possible. And if it's just men, my God, they end up sour, and they don't do it properly. They will not do it properly. They will not recycle, save, salvage the materials. I've seen it so many times. They just, what the fuck? Nobody loves me. I shall just chuck all this in a skip, when it could be salvaged. These raw materials, these that Caroline Lucas is there preaching about needing to keep. Well, I've had a lot to do with green people, and all they want to do is judge you, tell you you've got some now a medical disorder, which is an insulting slander, of course, but you can't say that to them. No, you suffer from narcissism, Asperger's, ADHD, whatever. You know, when every single one of them, when they go into the media, oh, poor me, I've got dyspraxia. It's so fashionable. Somebody blurted that out in the library yesterday. Yeah, they want to go on about these things rather than actually doing the work, and more important than anything, making it a social, genuine, long-term communal thing. That's what keeps people happy, and that's what brings love into people. And with love, you do the work better. That's the choice that the female of the species needs to make, and I've just seen it for 50 years, but particularly the last 25 years. No. It's all a fantasy. Basically, they're sitting at home reading their Guardian colour supplement about, oh, that would be a lovely Barbara good life kind of existence. But they never do the work, or even create the real community when you're in tough weather out picking up the roof tomorrow that's blown off, is laughing and both being on the same side, and like taking the piss out of each other, pulling your leg, solidarity, and enjoying it, and doing that hard day's work outdoor, and saying, well, you know what, this is hell, but I'm going to enjoy my bath tonight. All you ever get is bloody moaning. So that's what the environment actually is. And yes, there is a woman who lives down there who's employed by the council to pick up some of the rubbish, but she can't do all of that. You know, we have to have love, not love for the environment. It's about cherishing the environment for people we love. No green can ever speak or make any of that happen, which can be just as simple as where I used to live, most of the farmers, middle-aged men, don't have a wife anymore. The Greens, oh well, let's introduce some of them to some nice wives and it'll make their lives happier. Not somebody to skivvy at home, I'm not talking about that. No, no, no. The Greens blame everything else except what actually matters, which is having decent relationships and friendships as you're going along. Not their little clique, everybody else in the countryside. And all they've done, it's just been laughable over 15 years as I've seen it happen. All they've done is found language and new ways of being to just alienate everybody from each other. Especially the bloody relationship counsellors. It's laughable. That's probably the silliest rant ever, but I know it's true.